I'd like to greet everybody. First of all, welcome. Welcome to 25 Churchill, which is where we in Palo Alto hold our school board meetings. The friendly confines of 25 Churchill, welcome. I'd also like to welcome you to the Assembly District 21 Candidate Forum. And the topic of today's discussion is the future of K-12 public education in California. This is the first candidate event on public education in this election, and we're delighted with the participation of all three candidates. My name is Camille Townsend, and I am a member of the Palo Alto Board of Education. I will be assisted as moderator in today's event by a distinguished education panel seated to my left, who I will introduce in just a moment. But before I introduce that panel and the candidates on the dais, we need to acknowledge our sponsors. They include the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education, the Palo Alto PTA Council, the California Charter Schools Association, and the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, which is telecasting live on Comcast Channel 28 and streaming this forum live, and there will be playback scheduled for throughout this week. Thank you to all these sponsors. While it has changed over time and changes somewhat from year to year, about 52 to 55% of the state general fund budget is spent on K-12 and higher education. This is no small change. However, significant issues attend a large number of our students, and California bobbles around the bottom in per student spending. These will be some of the issues that will be facing these candidates who, if elected, will have a lot on their plate. Let me introduce our candidates who are seated in a lottery order. Thank you to Eric Schur, who is our timekeeper, who met with the candidates, and they are seated in a random order. And I asked the candidates, I'm going to go live here, figure out how to use this. I asked the candidates to send me a couple of line bio, and so I am actually reading from their bios as they wrote them, not as I did. And I'm going to start with Rich Gordon. Rich Gordon is the president of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors and a former school board member. For over 30 years, Rich has been a champion for children and youth. He began as a minister building opportunities for homeless youth and went on to create youth and family assistance and innovative nonprofit that provided counseling and employment training. Yuriko Kishimoto. Yuriko is the former mayor of Palo Alto and chair of the Finance Committee. She also served on the VTA Board of Directors, chair of the Climate Protection Committee of BAAQMD, which I don't know what that is, but
Bay Area Air Quality Management District.
Okay. The Joint Policy Committee, and as founding chair of the Peninsula Cities Consortium. Yuriko and her husband have two children who went through Addison, Castellia, and Pali. And now Josh Becker. Josh Becker is a green energy entrepreneur and treasurer of the UC Merced Foundation Board of Trustees and a father of two young children. Through his nonprofits, Full Circle Fund and National Lab Day, Josh has been an active education advocate on education issues for more than a decade. His efforts to improve test scores in math and science have been recognized by President Obama. Welcome to all three candidates. Now, let's talk briefly about the format. The format of today's event is such. Each candidate will get a 3-minute opening statement, and following that, the rest of the day will be a round robin, and each candidate will get the opportunity to answer every question asked. We will indicate how much time each question at the beginning. And again, Eric Schur is our timekeeper, so candidates can see where he is. The audience will also be asked to generate questions, and if you can give them to the various people standing around the room, they will come up to the panel and we'll sort them through. So let me introduce the panel. We have on the far left, Sari Mading. Sari is a board member of the Ravenswood City School District and an assistant principal of the East Palo Alto Charter School. Gordon Lewin, former board member of the Menlo Park City and Sequoia Union High School Districts. Kenji Hakuta, who is a professor at the Stanford University School of Education. So, here we are. We have an hour and a half to talk about education, and I would like to turn to the candidates for their 3-minute opening statements. And if we would, Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you to you for your efforts in organizing this, and to all of the sponsors, and thank you to all of you who are here this morning and those of you watching. My name is Rich Gordon, and my life's work has been on behalf of children and youth. It started as a youth minister, and then for over 20 years I worked in the field of social service, trying to help young people and families. I founded an agency in San Mateo County called Youth and Family Assistance, where we provided counseling services to young people. We ran the suicide prevention program in San Mateo County. We had residential facilities for young people. We also opened a restaurant that was a job training center to help people with vocational skills. Based on that work, I felt the government had a role to play in helping people achieve their dreams. And so I ran for the County Board of Education and served for 5 years on our county board. As a county board member, I worked to make sure that we had good teacher training programs. I worked to lower classroom size. And I worked closely with the special ed program in San Mateo County, which is administered through the County Office of Education. In 1997, I ran for the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, and I've been on the board for 13 years. During my tenure on the Board of Supervisors, I've continued to make children and youth a priority in my work. One of the things that I did early on was to work to establish a program for homework assistance. The county government, our county government in San Mateo, actually provides an annual grant to the County Office of Education. And they use that money to fund after-school homework centers for at-risk youth. The centers are staffed by teenagers, high school students who get paid to do that work. We think it's a real win-win program. I also serve in San Mateo County on our First Five Commission. This is the commission that works on issues related to children from 0 to 5. And there I was involved in the establishment of our Children's Health Initiative. We have insurance, health insurance, for every child in San Mateo County up to 400% of the federal poverty level. And we also established a universal preschool program. Most recently, over the last 18 months, I've been serving at a state level as chair of what is called the City-County Schools Partnership. It is an effort, joint effort of the leadership of the California School Boards Association, the State Association of Counties, and the League of Cities. And our efforts are to try to make sure that we look at greater service connection and linkage between all levels of local government, trying to make sure that schools become a hub of service as a community school model. I look forward to talking about that and other issues with you later in this forum. Thank you.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. I would also like to thank everyone for coming today, and thank Camille for organizing this very important forum. My name is Yoriko Kishimoto, and many of you probably know me already as mayor of Palo Alto, as a parent of 2 daughters who went to the system. One of them is in the back there. As an author of an internationally published book, Stanford MBA, and a small business owner. But you may not know my educational story. I began life in the United States as a first-generation immigrant. I began elementary school not knowing a word of English, and I was fortunate to have teachers who spent the time after school to teach me reading, how to read about Dick and Jane. And until 4th grade, they sent me to speech class to work on my R's and L's. I think I finally got that perfected. And I went on to Stanford Business School to start my consulting firm, which I ran for about 20 years in the U.S.-Japan area, and to write my book about California and America's future. So California today stands at a true crisis, almost a life and death point. And we've gotten to the point where further, quote, service cuts to education is just not an option anymore. Last summer, we saw the devastating impact of a $9.3 billion cut to education. It resulted in 20,000 teachers being laid off, a shorter school year, no new textbooks, summer classes being canceled, and many years ago, as a PTA mom and member of the site council, I mean, I saw the direct consequences of the dysfunctional state system on our classrooms. And of course, today it's become geometrically worse. So fixing the system is not going to be easy. But I jumped into office a number of years ago because I got mad. I was mad that people had given up on tackling the toughest problems. And I believe that I've developed a track record of reading every page of the budget, and the staff reports, of talking to the members, doing my homework, and tackling issues which are the most complex, technically, financially, politically, and doing the hard work of finding that kernel of common ground and building a coalition. And I'm proud to have been named Coalition Builder of the Year by the Palo Alto Weekly. Today, education is the single toughest and most important issue facing the state of California, and I will be proud to be your representative in tackling this problem with you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Josh Becker.
I also like to thank the organizers, and I also want to thank all of the parents in the room who worked on parcel tax campaigns recently in Palo Alto and Menlo Park. If you worked on the parcel tax campaigns, I see Robin, Stacy, raise your hands if you worked on those campaigns. Thank you to all of you for the work that you did in that effort. And that's representative of parents throughout this district, hundreds of thousands of parents throughout this district and the state who are willing to tax themselves, willing to spend time and organize and tax themselves because they care about education. And I want to take that same passion and commitment and those values to Sacramento. Because I believe that we share values throughout this district, values of a clean environment, values of access to quality, affordable health care, but most importantly, access to strong public education. And I've lived those values for the last 15 years myself, spending my own time organizing things like the Full Circle Fund, where it's been one of my greatest privileges in my life to bring together smart people, education experts and non-education experts, people who came in knowing nothing but just cared about the issue. And for the last 10 years, pooling together our time and our money, supporting the most innovative ideas we could find, looking throughout the spectrum, developing a theory of change, and attacking all areas around it, whether it be getting parents more involved in schools and getting immigrant parents more involved, or tackling problems like the Oakland School District, trying to help in that overhaul and improving it for 5 years running. But the values really came home to me when I had my own kids. My son Aaron is 4, and my daughter Sophie is going to be 6, 4 days after this election. She gave me this heart for good luck today, which I have with me. And when she entered kindergarten in September, that was one of the things that propelled me to get into this race. And I want them to have access to the same great public education that I had. And I want all kids in California to have access to a great public education and access to the opportunities that we all had. And I'm running to make sure that that happens. I have 3 main priorities. Jobs, number 1. We've lost 1 million jobs the last 3 years, and that's what we need to get the budget fixed and get the money that we need. Education, funding's number 1. All the reforms, none of the reforms will work unless we have adequate funding. Second, preparing kids for jobs of the future. Third, universal preschool. And fourth, working in the higher education system. And then also reforming the way business is done in Sacramento. So the challenge is huge. Quality public education has never been more at risk. But I'm reminded by my favorite quote of John F. Kennedy. He said that our problems are man-made, therefore they may be solved by man. and no problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. So we have enormous problems to fix education, but together we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statements. And now we're going to be turning to our panelists who at least 5 of the questions have been sent to the candidates ahead of time, and we're going to start with some of those questions, and those will have 2 minutes answer. These are 2-minute answers, and that's before we go to a lightning round later on. So we're trying to make this fun for everybody, but we start with Sari Mading on those questions to the candidates. And I think that the first question, following the round robin that we agreed to ahead of time, will go to Ms. Kishimoto.
There's much discussion about the role of choice in education. What is your position on the role of charter schools and vouchers in California? Please explain.
Thank you for the question. Well, choice is good. Innovation is great. So I oppose vouchers, and I support charter schools within parameters. So we all talk about an innovation-based economy. That my call to action as mayor was to build a green economy through innovation. But we needed innovation most of all in education. So charters do allow this out-of-the-box experimentation, which I believe is important. But of course, they are not all successful. Some of the data that has come out recently says that 15% of charters, according to their measurements, do better than the other regular schools. And 37% do worse, and the rest is equal. Obviously, this curve is not acceptable. We need to move that curve over to the opposite way, where most of the charters are better. So we do need to do a much better job of monitoring them, setting the right parameters, and also it's very important for us to, since charter schools do use public funds, that we learn from the experiments of that the charter schools do. So it's very important that they share the research with the larger schools, and we learn the best from them. Public school system, I mean, the reason why I oppose the voucher system is public schools, of course, are, it's very important that they be kept vibrant and excellent, that they continue to attract and serve from all the students, from the most brilliant to the most needy. And it's the unifying force in our democracy, and we have to be on our toes to make sure that we keep our public school system viable.
Thank you, Ms. Kishimoto. Mr. Becker?
Sure. I'm opposed to vouchers, and I think widespread vouchers in California are a dead issue, and I think anyone who believes in vouchers should really think about the unintended consequences of vouchers. I think charters are more interesting as a lab of innovation. I just want to make sure everyone understands that charters are a really small part of the landscape. It's about 4% of students right now in California attend charter schools. We're fortunate to have some fantastic charter schools in this district, in East Palo Alto, schools that started the charter school movement really in San Carlos and others. But they're very important, they're still a very small part of the landscape, and I'm very focused on each school and each student. And so I think that there's really no magic to charter schools. There are bad charter schools, and we have to make them into good schools. And then there are good charter schools, and we need to learn from them.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Well, we can make it 3 for 3 on vouchers. I'm also opposed to vouchers. As it relates to charter schools, I think that charter schools have been an incredible asset to the innovation in education and can provide us with good learning lessons on how to improve our educational system. But having said that, I also think that charters bear a level of responsibility that comes with the capacity to innovate. Part of that responsibility is that I believe that charters need to make sure that their processes are as open and transparent as all public education should be to parents and to citizens. I support a limit on the number of charter schools that could exist in any given district, because I think that there are challenges for districts who have to move beyond just their regular school to include the charter school concept. I also think that we need to find a separate funding stream for the facilities for charter schools because of the conflict that often arises between the innovation of a charter school and the ability of a local school district to figure out how to pay for the facility. Charter schools should not detract from the rest of public education. They ought to be able to enhance it, and I think a separate funding system would be appropriate. I also think that charters need to be held accountable to performance measures and standards, and that we should find a way to make sure that their innovations are widespread. Not all children learn the same way, and as part of the reform of public education, we need to find new and different ways to educate our children. Charter schools can help us do that.
Thank you, all three. Back to our panel, Mr. Lewin.
Thank you. Every representative declares that, education is one of their top priorities. If elected, how would we as the public know that through your actions that indeed public education was in fact your top priority?
Mr. Becker.
Sure. Well, you'll know that it's a priority by how I spend my time, how I spend our money as taxpayers, and how I spend my political capital in Sacramento. And I think you can look at my past performance to see that it is a priority. I care deeply about fixing our schools, and it's really what got me into this race, where my daughter started kindergarten in Las Lomitas. And my role serving on the Board of Trustees as a founding trustee of UC Merced. So this is how I've spent my time as a private citizen for the last 10 years with Full Circle Fund, working on these issues.
Sorry.
Got a little musical accompaniment. Working.
Would everybody turn off their cell phones?
Sure. So for the last 10 years working on this issue for the Full Circle Fund, starting things like National Lab Day. This is an innovation we just started about 10 months ago, and now Michelle Obama talked about it this week. The President's talked about it as an innovation that doesn't cost money. Let's get all the scientists and engineers, the smart people in our communities, and get them into our schools with teachers that want to do hands-on learning. And then myself driving to the Central Valley for the last 6 years to be part of UC Merced because I thought it was important. It's the lowest college attendance rate in the state, the poorest part of our state, and I thought that we had to change the college aspirations of kids in the Central Valley, which we've now done. But now all of that success is under threat right now because of Sacramento and because of the decisions that have been made. And that's why I'm running, because this is my priority, and I think you can look at my past actions to say that this will be a priority when I get to the State Assembly.
Mr. Gordon.
Gordon, thank you for the question. Here's what you'll see. Number one, you'll see an assemblyman who aggressively seeks appointment to the Assembly Committee on Education. That's where the action happens, and that's where I want to be, and I will aggressively seek that. You'll also see an assemblyman who refuses to make further cuts in the state budget for education, and who will fight efforts to suspend at any point the Prop 98 requirements. Most importantly for this assembly district, you will find an assemblyman who will fight to maintain funding for basic aid districts. 20 of the 28 school districts in this assembly district are basic aid. And in the recent past, there have been efforts made to reduce the funding of that basic aid districts received back down to revenue limit. It was an effort made to balance the state budget by taking money away from those districts that receive their funding from property tax and not from state dollars. What we actually need to do is exactly the opposite. We need to raise the revenue limit for all districts so that we raise the bar, put more money into education, and help get those revenue limit districts that are our low wealth districts up to the level of basic aid. But this particular assembly district, one of the most critical issues will be to fight for and maintain the capacity of local school boards who are basic aid districts to maintain their funding.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. Well, my two predecessors stole quite a bit of my thunder. I mean, I would also be very, very proud to serve on the Assembly Committee on Education, to continue the important work that Senator Simidian and our representatives have done in playing a state leadership role in education. It really is a high-stakes district and high-stakes time because our district has traditionally sent people who do take state leadership role in from both education as well as economy and environment, and I'm committed to following that tradition. In addition to the items that have been mentioned, I do agree on the basic aid issues, leveling up, of course, a full commitment to full funding, and the most important way to get to the full funding is to work with you, the voters, to overturn the 2/3 requirement to pass the budgets and add new revenues. The 2/3 requirement is the single biggest obstacle to full funding, and that's something that we need to focus on. I also believe that we need to redirect our budget spending, hopefully away from end-of-the-pipe spending, which is prison spending, redirect that 10 or 11% of prison spending and direct it to more upstream spending, which is early education funding, so we can catch learning disabilities early, address achievement gap issues so that they're prepared to start school prepared. We need to, I also want to focus on teachers. That's the single most important gateway to improvement in education. That is what all the studies I read say, that we need to invest in teacher education at the CSU levels. And I look forward to working on all these.
Thank you. Let us now lead to the next question by Professor Hakuta.
Good morning. This question is around education standards, California standards, and as you know, there's a movement now that's called the Common Core Standards, which is supported by the Council of Chief State School Officers as well as the National Governors Association, to create a common core standards that lead to college and career readiness. And so my question is really how you think that whether California should participate in this Common Core effort, and what that would mean, whether that's a desirable thing in the context of current standards in California.
Mr. Gordon.
Good, thank you. I do support Common Core standards for the country. One of the dynamics at the moment is that under No Child Left Behind, each state was allowed to set its own standards. Here in California, we have set very high standards. Other states, including the state of Texas, recently lowered their standards in order to show greater improvement for No Child Left Behind. So a common standard across the nation would put all states in the same playing field as it would relate to federal funding under either No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top. However, having said that I would support Common Core standards nationwide, I would like to see that standard be what's used for the testing and the evaluation of schools on a national basis, but I don't want to lower California standards. I want our standards to remain high. And so I would like us to be evaluated against a national Common Core standard, but I'd like us to maintain our very high standards in California so that we can continue to move towards increased educational excellence in this state.
Thank you, Ms. Yuriko, or Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you very much, Camille. Well, this is a topic, very important topic, and obviously it's something that I would like to hear more from the experts and from the community on. But since you asked, I did take a quick look at the proposed standards, and they do seem well drafted. And what's important to me is that they really seem to be a bottom-up process. It's really not top down, bottom up from the states to distill the best research and best thinking from around the world. It's very also important to me what these standards stay away from. They stay away from telling teachers and schools how to reach the standards. So they do leave. They also stay away from providing or dictating the curriculum. So in that way, they leave a great deal of discretion to the school districts, the states, the principals, and the teachers to use their creativity to really and to customize the approach to each area and hopefully to each student as well. I absolutely agree that that California needs to work with the federal government as a partner in developing the best federal common standards possible, and that California keep for itself the discretion of going above and beyond the standards.
Mr. Becker.
Thanks. I'm very open to it. I mean, California has been a leader in establishing strong standards, as you know, and I think it's very important that we don't walk away from those. I think the good news is it increasingly looks like they propose Common Core standards will be California-like in their rigor, and I think it'd be important, and there's advantages to that happening and us being able to adopt Common Core standards, because it'll open up ultimately a much larger market for innovation in learning materials and open source learning materials, in kind of adaptive online instruction and kind of next generation tests that go way beyond the number 2 pencil. I think all that could be opened up by some national core standards. But I think there's a much important principle here for me too, and that's how are we helping each student reach his or her capacity, and how are we helping each district reach its capacity. That's where we developed in Full Circle Fund something called the EACH platform. Here in our area, we've got districts that are performing very well here in Palo Alto, and we've got districts like Ravenswood where the state is threatening takeover. By the way, as if the state has a ready pool of school take-around experts to come on in and help. So that's what I'm very focused on, is how do we help each student, each teacher, each district reach its full potential.
The next question I'll give from one of our sponsors, and I believe it goes to Ms. Kishimoto first. Yes. The question is, what are the biggest issues in special education that face the Assembly in California, and how would you address them?
Thank you very much for the question. So I'd like to bring up two issues. One is really the challenge of can the state take a more systemic and smarter approach to addressing special education. And I think the most important approach there is early evaluation and intervention. And this is something that would result in both more impact, more effectiveness, as well as hopefully save money over the long term. So in order to do that, we need to fund teacher training so that all teachers, both in preschool and regular school, are fully qualified to detect the need for evaluation, and also fund county regional system centers so that they can support the schools and teachers in effectively supporting these students. And we also need more effective ways of reaching the preschool children so that we can identify and begin addressing their needs so that they're fully prepared as prepared as they can be to start school. And one source for funding for this is, because it is something that may cost money, may be a proposed legislation that is coming from Senator Simitian. I think it's AB 656, which would move up the kindergarten date. And this is something that would bring in $300 million a year to preschool education. And I'm envisioning that this is some part of that funding could be dedicated to this. The other one, which I'll mention quickly, is funding. That special education is a congressional mandate. They've committed to funding 40%, but in reality, I know in Palo Alto numbers, they fund only 10%. So it's important that the state work with the federal government for full funding.
Thank you. Mr. Becker.
Well, I'm very concerned about the growth of students identified with special needs, including autism spectrum disorders. The numbers that we hear now are 1 in 100 for kids, 1 in 60 for boys, or some of the numbers that we're hearing now. My own brother-in-law is autistic, and I'm very proud to work with Autism Speaks and work with funding research at Stanford right now into what is causing this. I mean, our school is not prepared for this influx of kids, and we have to figure out what's going on. And I'm very concerned about, ultimately this comes down to funding. And I'm very concerned right now that because of the lack of funding from the state, that we're now pitting parents of special needs kids against parents of non-special needs kids. And I think that's a really unhealthy dynamic. And it does come back to funding. As Yurko pointed out, the federal government is supposed to fund 40% of our special education needs. They've never funded more than 19% at a state level. But the state has some responsibility for this as well. Every time they give us additional money, we use it for something else. In Arnold's current budget, he requested $1 billion more from the federal government for special education. And that same budget, he uses that $1 billion for something else. And it's not just Arnold. Gray Davis did the same thing. We got additional money in, about $250 million, and used it for something else. So ultimately this comes down to funding, and it comes down to honest budgeting in Sacramento so that we can get the money that we need here for our schools.
Mr. Gordon.
The question was what issues face the Assembly in California as it would relate to special ed. I think one, to begin with, is an issue that comes from what's called Assembly Bill 3632. This is a piece of legislation passed in the mid-'80s that required a shift from school districts to county governments for the provision of mental health services to special ed students. What's happening around the state is that county governments, given their cash-strapped basis, are pulling back on the funding that they're making available under AB 3632, and therefore squeezing the special education program in a way, particularly for those students who need mental health services. The State Assembly needs to address this question, and it needs to fully fund the mental health services that it guaranteed under AB 3632 to be provided by local county governments. I also would agree that we need to work to get additional federal funding and get the federal government to meet its commitment to special education. And in that regard, I think that the Assembly ought to develop a delegation that takes on as a goal and mission to be in Washington on a regular basis to advocate and get us that money. I also think another issue that the Assembly needs to address in relationship to special education is the impact that special education may have on a smaller school district. All it takes in a small school district is 4 or 5 students with very severe needs for that school district to end up having some financial difficulties. Children with the most severe needs, that funding ought to come from, I think, a separate system funded by the state of California. It's an issue I believe that the State Assembly should address.
Thank you. The last question we have of the 2-minute pre-prepared questions, Ms. Medin.
Okay, a generation ago, California ranked first in the nation in quality of education, and now it ranks near the bottom. What happened, and what should the Assembly do about it?
Mr. Becker.
Sure. Well, it's not rocket science to know what happened. What happened is we had a Supreme Court decision, Serrano versus Priest, and as we all know, that took the power and gave the funding, made all the funding go up to Sacramento, and then Sacramento, in its infinite wisdom, would redistribute that funding. We were going to have power equalization to equalize funding. Then what happened is several years after that, then we had Prop 13. So we gave all the money to Sacramento, and then we cut the money. And that's one of the main drivers that have led us to this state. And so that's why we know that funding is critical. We are a high-wage state. We're a high cost of living state with lower than average per pupil spending. That's why we have the lowest ratio of counselors in the country, lowest ratio of librarians in the country, and among the lowest ratios of teachers per students in the country. and that's what we have to fix. And I think what we know is, to think that we're going to try, do the same thing and expect different results is the definition of, I guess, insanity. And so we need to try different things. And I think one thing we've learned, hopefully, over the last 30 years is that each school has to be a community school. We have to give communities, again, power of funding, and more power and more responsibility over the local schools so that we can tie schools closer to the community and get people a stake again. And so that's one of the things that we've worked on very closely. We have to lower the parcel tax threshold. We did that successfully with school bonds in Prop 39 from 66% to 55%. And we unleashed billions of dollars of bonds that got more than 55%, couldn't get 66%. That's among the changes we need to do to enable more local funding, but then have matching funds. So districts like East Palo Alto, if they want to do parcel tax, there'll be matching funds up at the state level to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
The wording in the question is interesting, because the question says that the quality has declined. I can make a great argument for the funding decline, and I can talk about that at some length. But in terms of quality, our schools are actually performing very well, in spite of the severe financial problems that they face. In 2003, in the fourth grade tests, there was 39% proficient or better in English. 6 years later, it went up to 60%. Our schools are improving in this climate. Now, that means that local school boards, parents, and teachers are working harder than ever to achieve this good quality with very limited resources. And the thing that does need to be addressed in California is the resources. All started with Prop 13 and the transfer of power from local school boards and the transfer of taxes to the state of California. We have centralized too much decision-making in California. We've taken it out of the hands of local school boards. We need to return power and authority and responsibility to local school boards. Allow the state to set some standards as to where they would like to see local communities achieve to, but the local communities decide how to get there. And give them the tools to do that. Reduce the threshold to pass local taxes to a simple majority. And let local communities make decisions. I absolutely believe that the best educational decisions are made as close as possible to the child. And that can only be done by parents, teachers, and local school boards. We need to return power to them.
Thank you. Like many of you, I'm a product of the public schools in America. As I told you earlier, I was fortunate to have teachers stay after school to tutor me, to catch me up. And I had tremendous teachers along the way that I remember with great fondness and respect, and I'm sure all of you do as well. And like you, I want every child in California to have the same opportunities that I did, the same access to public education. So I think we all know the causes of what brought us here. So I want to focus on what we can do about it. So the most important is funding, as you heard. That, as I said earlier, the 2/3 requirement, eliminating that is the single most important step we can do to unlock I think the pretty universal desire, the universal wish that we all have as parents for our children. I mean, I think actually if you ask all Republicans and Democrats, they will agree on that. But there is an ideological feeling by a minority that for a no new taxes, no matter what some of the consequences are. So funding is number one. And then in terms of educational strategy, I mentioned earlier, teachers. And then there was a McKinsey study from a couple years ago that looked at all these factors, everything from local control to classroom size and every possible way. And the conclusion they came down to were the three most important factors were to recruit the most appropriate people to become teachers, to train them to become effective instructors, and to develop a system that supports them and is continuously improved. So that's the single most important thing that I believe we should focus on.
Okay, we now move to our 30-second lightning round. So if we start, Mr. Lewin, on the questions to the candidates and to the timekeeper, they will have 30 seconds each. Thank you. Oh gosh, I just lost. Thank you.
I was first up for that one.
Thank you. Question.
Question is, you've been elected to the legislature. What committee, Mr. Gordon made a brief reference to this. What committees do you want to be on? Which will be your top priorities, both committees and subcommittees? Will you really advocate to serve on if elected?
Well, as I said earlier, Education Committee is my first priority. I would also like to serve on the Local Government Committee, because I think that that's a place that we begin to take a look at the relationship between the centralized power in Sacramento and local control. And finally, I would be very interested in serving on the budget committees, and particularly the subcommittee that would relate to education.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. Yes, I have also committed to serving on the Committee on Education. I believe it is the top priority for our district. And I will also apply for the budget. I mean, I want to use my Stanford MBA and my experience serving as chair of the Finance Committee to provide oversight on the budget and fix the budget problem.
Mr. Becker.
Budget Committee number one, I'm very proud my good friend Bob Blumenfeld, who I worked with 18 years ago at Howard Berman's office, is now chair of the Budget Committee. Really thoughtful, smart guy. He's been there 4 weeks. You can expect great things from him, and I'd be honored to serve on that committee. And that's ultimately our education issues, I think, as we all identified, are really budget issues right now. Also, for my kind of green energy viewpoint, the Natural Resources Committees can be very important to me as well.
Great. Next question.
Who's going to go first here? Okay.
Ms. Kishimoto.
So,
Mr. Hakuta.
You all referred both to issues of teacher quality and the importance of teacher quality, but also the need for local control and local decision making. And yet, the quality of teachers is really something that is done at the state role, and something that I think is research shows is very, very important for quality schools. And so I'd like you to address the issues around recruitment and retention of quality teachers and what the state can be doing in that area.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it starts with training. So, I mean, I think we do need to invest or restore funding to the CSUs, California State Universities, for excellent teaching. I believe in centers for excellence for teacher education. The new teacher center at UC Santa Cruz, I think, is a great example. So, kind of continuous and teacher-to-teacher peer review, peer support, and mentoring of really kind of creating this community of learners.
3 things. Retention is critical. New Teacher Center, we're very proud to work with them at Full Circle Fund very closely for a number of years. We lose about 40% of new teachers within the first few years. Secondly, we need to provide incentives for new teachers to teach in districts like Ravenswood. How can we find ways to incent them to get there and to stay? And then third, fix the budget. I was talking to former Mayor of Mountain View yesterday. One of her programs her own kids go to, 4 of 10 teachers are getting laid off. And these are all the young teachers who are now losing. And therefore, we have to fix the budget system so we don't have this crazy up and down.
First of all, improve funding for our colleges and universities so that there is good quality teacher training in the university and college setting. Secondly, I think that once a teacher starts work, we need to establish good, solid mentoring programs so that there are master teachers who help new teachers get grounded in their profession. And we need to make sure that there are incentives for teachers to stay on the job. And we can look at that both in terms of funding, but also in terms of performance activities that we could engage them in.
Thank you. We've got everybody. I'm going to throw this question in here. Mr. Becker? A significant number of people in America do not believe that evolution is a scientific fact. This influences curriculum choice and textbook adoption. What is your position on whether evolution is a scientific fact, and how should textbooks handle this?
Well, I'm going to take a stand on this one. I don't care how it costs me politically in this district, but I believe evolution is a fact. But listen, I don't know what else to say on that one. But it's scary that we have that there are folks in this country who don't believe it's a fact. And I will do whatever I can to reinforce the fact that evolution is a fact. Thank you. I don't know what else.
And if you could address the second part, and how should textbooks handle this?
Well, I think textbooks should treat it as a fact, and we should all be very concerned what's happening in Texas, leveraging its power as a textbook buyer to influence textbooks, and we can't let that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
It's almost unbelievable we get this question in this district. I take evolution as a fact, and having said that, it should be treated factually in our textbooks. And California also has tremendous buying power. We need to make sure that we do our part to guarantee that the textbooks in America keep this as a fact-based, scientific-based activity.
Maybe California can play a leadership role in making sure it's not part of the national Common Core curriculum. And in terms of the textbooks, the Common Core doesn't require the textbook, so it is up to each state. So California does have it in its power to keep evolution in our textbooks.
Thank you so much. Back to Ms. Meding.
Okay, so
Just wait. The question goes this time to Mr. Gordon.
right, so the retirement programs for public employees in California, including teachers, are a huge underfunded liability for the state, perhaps as much as $400 billion. Most would agree that they are so big that it will threaten the core educational missions. How do you plan to tackle this problem?
Well, first of all, the one thing that I do think needs to be done immediately is to
Mr. Gordon, you know what? We're going to give them a minute for this one.
yeah,
Okay.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's on the next page. So you have 3 minutes. So let's go to him. Yeah, that's right. Is that enough? All right.
That's much better. I was trying to figure out how to do that in 30 seconds.
If you would all like 90 seconds, we could do that too.
Well,
You
let's
want
try.
90 seconds? Sure, let's do 90 seconds. All right, 90 seconds it is. Mr. Gordon.
Wow. 90 seconds going once, going twice. I'll take it. First of all, one of the things that I do support and think we need to get in place immediately is the elimination of a practice called pension spiking, which is less true in the education arena in terms of retirement, but more true in other public service sectors. And that is where people pad their last year of employment with additional overtime, unused vacation, in order to spike up the base for which their retirement is focused on. We need to change that immediately. Then I think it is imperative that we engage our public sector employees in a discussion about the future of the retirement program. It is probably not sustainable in the direction that it is currently, and I think that what we have tried to do in San Mateo County is lay our books open. We've invited our public sector employees to the table. We've shown them every single dollar and cent and where it goes. We've asked them to participate and help us find savings, and we've talked with them at some length about the challenges that will occur if we, in a limited budget sector, have to cut services because we have to continue the salaries and benefits at the level that they are. we need to work collaboratively with our employees to try to achieve some adjustments and changes in the current climate.
Ms. Kishimoto.
It's a good question because we just spent a lot of time talking about how teachers are the heart of how we deliver good services. So obviously we need to pay a great deal of attention to how do we attract and retain the best teachers. So we do need to provide excellent pay for the teachers and provide fair pay. But we also need to pay attention to the total compensation package. So as a city council member in Palo Alto, I was one person who did scrutinize the long-term consequences, and I was one vote against the decision to roll back the retirement age from 60 to 55, which really added $5 million a year to our budget. So one thing is to make the right decisions moving forward and vote in somebody who's actually going to pay attention and make the right decisions. Two is I really kind of look at things on a total compensation basis. And then finally, I just want to say, mention this very interesting group called Teacher Solutions, I believe, which is a group of teachers who said, well, why is everybody else discussing this? Why don't they ask us teachers what a fair compensation package is? And they actually came up with a series of very interesting and sophisticated recommendations, which I don't have time to go into, but that's the approach I would take.
Thank you. Mr. Becker.
I'll say three things. One is we have to restore honesty in budgeting. That's not the number. The number you use is not the number that's commonly reported. That was, I believe, out of the Stanford study. And one of the reasons I'm running, talk about being the innovation Democrat, is to use openness and transparency to get the facts on the table about our state budget, where are we spending the money now, what the liabilities are going forward, so we can have an honest conversation. Second, just to make the point, I think it's important that we be careful not to scapegoat public employees in times of trouble like this. The average CalPERS pension is about $23,000 a year. So even my own in-laws, my wife's parents are both teachers their whole lives. They're up in Oregon, now retired, and they have a small pension from teaching, but that's their retirement that they worked hard for. On the other hand, we do have to have a conversation. From my talks with the labor unions, they're ready to have that conversation and talking about, okay, what can we do? And things like spiking that Rich mentioned, absolutely we have to stop. And we have to look at the retirement age. People are living longer. And we have to look at maybe capping pensions at some level. And I think these are all conversations that the unions are willing to have, in my experience, and that we need to have.
Thank you. If we might return back to the 90-second lightning round, and no apologies needed here, Mr. Gordon, and let us, let's see, is it Ms. Kishimoto? Oh, I'm sorry, 30-second, yes. Okay.
Ms. Kishimoto made a brief reference to her childhood experience in schools. If all of you could comment briefly on your best and worst experience as a K-12 student yourselves, we all were one once, and how does that flavor your approach to education policy today? Maybe it's more than 30 seconds.
That wasn't on my 30-second page, but that's all right. You want to give it a minute? 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. Well, best, I think I mentioned, it's really my experience really walking into a classroom, not knowing a word of English, and as an immigrant, kind of really, I actually went to public schools in Illinois, Michigan, Massachusetts, a number of public schools all over the U.S. I'm the expert on education all over the United States, and really they were all excellent schools. And so and of course coming from Japan originally as well, it's education just becomes, as you know, I'm an Asian parent, and education is really just core to all our children's future. I mean, it's just that. I don't know if I can talk about a worst experience. can't really think of one. So maybe I'll pass on that then.
Okay, very good. Mr. Becker.
Well, I think about my best experience. It all goes back to specific teachers. Right? It's Professor Lightum, my history professor, that encouraged me to go become a history major in college, and my Spanish teacher that got me interested in Spanish culture and encouraged me to ultimately go spend 7 months as a volunteer in Guatemala and El Salvador, and a math teacher. He was just phenomenal. The kind of guy you just remember your whole life, and I think that influences my decision making. We have to value teachers, and I think that's one thing that, and it's going to influence my decision making in California. What can we do to empower teachers, make them feel supported, have enough funding for teachers, in terms of worst experience, I don't know. I have to think about that one. But I will say on the East Coast, the other thing I remember about school is we had school buses and school lunches and other things. I think things that we've forgotten about here in California. We've gotten so far back, we can't even think about getting back to some of these things. So because our funding's been cut so much, and that reminds me of that.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon.
So 4th grade here in California, we study California history. My worst experience was when my model of Mission San Juan Bautista fell apart. I can only blame it on bad glue. My best experiences all relate to quality teachers. And the one that immediately came to mind was an 8th grade science teacher at Crocker Middle School in Hillsborough, Mr. Perks. And we actually had a science lab in those days, in 8th grade, fully funded with the state-of-the-art equipment. But he was also an incredible teacher, highly motivated, inspirational, encouraging of his students. The best experiences are always with the best teachers.
Thank you. I think the teachers in the audience would appreciate all your answers. Mr. Professor Hakuta, and is this what second? Do we have a 30 second?
This is 30 seconds.
Okay. So 30 seconds, and it's to Mr. Becker.
This is about the California Standards Test, which is published annually for grades 2 to 11, separately for each school, grade level, and subcategories of students. Some people say should be thrown out, that we should end that practice, especially during tough budget times. What do you think about that?
Whether we should stop the testing altogether, you're saying, or stop publishing?
This says throw out the assessment standards by which the school and state evaluate student progress.
Well, I don't think we should throw out the assessment standards at all, but I think that there is a danger of being too reliant on testing. So like testing 2nd graders, as you pointed out, that we do here. It's important to know if students are on track, but there's a risk in being too reliant on tests and to testing our students too much. So I would support reducing some reliance on standardized tests, but not throwing them out altogether, as the question seems to suggest.
Mr. Gordon.
Well, I would maintain the current testing regimen, but I think we have to find a way to move beyond this in terms of evaluating student performance. The ability to fill in a bubble on a piece of paper is not really education. What we need are performance-based measurements that show us whether students have qualities of critical thinking, whether they have the ability to work in teams, whether they have the ability to become lifelong learners. So we need a performance-based system to complement the current testing system.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Well, one of the best pieces of advice I heard about testing was that you should test only if it leads to your doing something different. So so testing can make sense, but only if California actually has either the budget or the wherewithal to actually do something with the results of the test. So if we don't, I think it's a good question of, dropping the testing. And if we do, and of course, I am a believer in evaluation. So if it's not testing, we do need to evaluate at points, but to guide what we do next.
Thank you. You're ready. Okay.
This one will definitely be a 30-second, not 90. School seems to be the agency of last resort for increasing number of social problems. This is like poor nutrition, obesity, teen pregnancies, emotional health, drug abuse, and all of that. Schools are taking these problems on. So is this the proper role of schools with increasingly diminishing budgets? Why or why not?
Mr. Gordon.
Well, I believe in a concept that's called a community school, and that is where there are partnerships. We do this in San Mateo County. We have community schools in Redwood City, in Half Moon Bay, Daly City. County services, city services are all brought to bear at the school site in support of the educational mission. So those agencies that have responsibility for nutrition, that have responsibility for mental health, for public health, come to the school to deliver those services, leaving the educators free to do the education, and I support that model.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. Well, parental involvement is often pointed to as as also the key to student success. So it's something I believe that we need to go back to. It's that all the schools, and again, not to put the burdens just on the schools, but to all of us as community members, and to get all the parents involved. That should be one indicator. And yes, I believe in that whole child and collaborative approach to addressing the needs of the child.
Well, whether we think it should be or not, the reality is it is. But what we've proven now throughout the state, there are some schools in the poorest parts of the state where the students are performing fantastically well. And some of those are charter schools, some of those are not charter schools. We need to learn from those schools. So this is much more than a 30-second question. We also need to encourage innovation. So we've funded things like Revolution Foods to get healthy food, organic food in schools, to limit obesity. Also things like Niroga Institute, Full Circle Fund we funded. I was very skeptical of this. These guys go and do yoga in the schools. They've done them in Richmond and Oakland to great success. So we have to solve these problems.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, another 30-second, and this time it goes to, help me, Ms. Kishimoto.
That's who's paying attention.
You all spoke about having wonderful teachers, when you were growing up. Could you address the issue of whether there need to be changes to our tenure and seniority system as a way of improving teacher quality? As you know, teacher quality has been, demonstrated by academic researchers as being a key factor in student performance, indicated by your own personal stories. Can you speak to the policy issue?
This sounds more like a minute. Let's do a minute on this one.
And so which two aspects did you say?
Yeah, and if you could repeat that.
Changes needed to the seniority and tenure system for teachers in California to improve teacher quality?
Okay. Well, this is one of the most important questions. I do believe that the 2 years that we spend today for judging tenure is too short. That seems to be a fairly universal sentiment. It should be at least 3 years, if not longer. And on the seniority issue, I would almost kind of go back to the study that I read about it came out of Teacher Solutions, and it's really tied to kind of performance and teacher training and professional development. So I think they tiered the teachers into 3 tiers. It was maybe something like beginner, professional, and expert, and that you were rewarded more on your professional development and your expertise, rather than just the pure number of years that you were teaching. So that's what I remember, but it's something that I believe should be looked at.
Mr. Becker.
Well, it's an important issue. I think we have to be very careful. We don't want to discourage young people from entering the profession. And what we're doing now in California is, hey, you can enter the profession, and then 2 years later you're out, and you don't have a job. So we have to be, not because of tenure, just because of the budget situation. We have great teachers that we're now laying off because they're the first ones to go. So what we've done, and so I do think there's a lot of important areas for innovation and things that we can change here in California, and I've been very happy to look at some of these issues. The teachers unions actually gave us a grant at Full Circle Fund, and we've worked with them to look at things like alternative compensation methods, what's working in Colorado, what are they doing in Minnesota, what's working across the country, and how should we think about adopting some of those practices here. San Francisco right now is doing a very interesting initiative that I can't explain in a minute in this area, and I think we can look to that for some specific examples and hopefully some specific success.
Mr. Gordon.
But across this country, the national average for the provision of tenure is 3 years, and it may be something that we should be looking at in California. I do think that tenure does provide a level of security that is necessary for young professionals to know that they can achieve. But I also think that the only way we get to tenure and to these issues is through a rigorous system of peer review and teacher support of teachers. We need teacher mentoring programs. We need those teachers who we have identified and we know are the quality teachers to help train and bring along new teachers. The challenges that our teachers face in California are immense. 50% of the children in California are on free or reduced lunch. 25% of the children in California, English is a second language. Teachers face huge challenges. We need to give them the tools and the help so that they can achieve the tenure in a reasonable period of time.
Thank you. We have one guest question here. We called Jennifer Bester yesterday, or maybe the day before, because we saw she hit the newspapers with a question or a letter that she had sent to Warren Buffett about, well, she'll ask the question. Come on up, and you have 90 seconds to answer it.
Hello. A statewide report released last week by the California Tax Reform Association confirmed my personal findings, showing that commercial property is shouldering a smaller and smaller percentage of local funding for schools, community colleges, parks, libraries, police, fire in California. In both Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, we see about a 15% drop in contributions since Prop 13 was passed in 1978. That's $1 out of 6. In the process, an increasingly uneven playing field is occurring for business. 20 to 25% of commercial property is paying full freight, while 25 to 40% of commercial property owners are traveling on a super discounted senior ticket. Addressing property tax in California is called the third rail of our politics. How would you successfully tap into commercial property tax for that bottom paying 20 to 25%, 40%, for the health of all of our schools, as well as the vitality of our local business communities?
Mr. Becker.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I think it's incredible, and it just shows what we can do when we get citizens engaged. People like yourself, people like Elizabeth Alexis working on high-speed rail that have found things that no one else in the state has found. The people that are paid to do this for a living, you can't find these things. And we have people in our community who are stepping up. And that's more than anything. I mean, I'm about changing policies, but ultimately I realize that we need people to get people involved to change. And that's what I've really done throughout my career, is bring people together to find solutions to big public problems. To get to your specifics, absolutely, it's something I'm talking about a lot. We have to address the tough issues, and that's why I'm going. I'm running up there. I'm going to address the tough issues. And if people then decide to vote me out, or if I get exiled, well, I'll go back to what I was doing and being a green energy entrepreneur. I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to go address the tough issues. And I've been talking about this during our campaign as well. I'm developing my own PowerPoint presentation for how I think, what's wrong in California. And we have a number of slides on property taxes. And we use some of the research that I think probably came from you. In Menlo Park, we have no clear example. We have the Draegers and the Trader Joe's that are literally 2 blocks from each other. And it turns out that Draegers pays about 7 times the property taxes that Trader Joe's pays. And so to me, this is not pro-business or anti-business. It's about fairness. It's about fairness and equality. And so we have to fix that. And it's one of the things that I'm talking about, because ultimately we have to educate the public, so the public gets up in arms and says, we have to fix this. This is crazy.
Mr. Gordon.
Let me also add my congratulations to you for your incredible work. You've shown a spotlight on an issue that a lot of us in government have talked about for a long time, but have had a hard time getting traction on, so thanks. I actually believe that it is time for us to revisit and re-examine Prop 13 in its entirety.
I forgot to do this. Hold your applause. Okay.
Number one, the unintended consequence of shifting power to Sacramento that Prop 13 brought us, the 2/3 vote requirement that it initiated, the fact that it changed the dynamic between commercial and residential property in terms of who pays what, and the fact that it also means that there are huge inequities and lack of fairness in residential taxation. I had my home for 20 years. The young family who moved in to the house next door last year pays 10 times more property tax than I do. They don't take 10 times more service. I don't think that's fair somehow. Now, I think there is a way to achieve a couple of really good outcomes that were looked at in Prop 13. One was to have the assurity of what the property tax would be over time. One of the problems was before Prop 13, it was fluctuating too dramatically. We need assurity of that, and we need to find a way to make sure that we protect folks on fixed income so that they can stay in their homes. I think you can do that while reforming Prop 13, and we need to get about this business.
Thank you. Ms. Kishimoto.
We do need overall tax reform. There's a commission called, I think it was called the Commission on the 21st Century Economy that came out about a year ago. And what they recommend is actually a move towards a value-added tax, that it would replace the income tax and hopefully the sales tax, and that it's a much more stable tax. Since our expenditures are very stable, we need to have a more stable revenue source, and it's a fair tax. So ideally, that's a long-term goal. In the meantime, I mean, yes, Prop 13 does need to be reformed, but we've seen the reaction in Palo Alto, for example, when we try to do a business license tax. So we do have to be careful of the impact on the businesses, and perhaps the way to do that is to support the split roll, but to phase it in so we don't make a sudden change, and we don't hurt the small businesses in our towns as well. So maybe instead of a 2% increase every year, we just move to a 3%. And one thing you learn in the business school and as investors is the accumulation over the years of what a difference in 1% a year can make. So I do believe that we do need to bring, it used to be 60-40 split commercial to residential, and we need to bring the balance back.
Well, I know the audience will be surprised, but we only have 10 minutes left. It's been so fascinating, and we have to give the candidates a minute each at the end to do their closing statement. So we're going to do a quick 30 seconds. Professor.
I'm going to pull the question that I was going to ask in favor of a question from the audience, which is, we live in Silicon Valley, the engine of technology driving innovation around the globe. If elected, how will you leverage technology in specific ways to improve a broken public education system?
Mr. Gordon.
Well, two comments here quickly. First of all, if you go into a classroom today, it doesn't look much different than the classroom that I went to school in. We do not have the kind of technology that we need for our students. And so we need to invest in the technology in the classroom. And we also, in this region, need to be very aggressive in seeking federal dollars to support research which helps grow our innovation and our economy regionally.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Great question. I mean, I believe that we just haven't begun to tap the potential for to use technology to really transform education. that that we need to move away from kind of mass production education to more customized and individualized education. And while at the same time you want to keep the classroom experience for the lectures and the peer-to-peer learning and education, but that we can, I would predict if we were successful in doing it, we can transform education through technology.
Mr. Becker.
Well, this is critical. 50%, two reasons. 50% of kids in Silicon Valley are below grade level in math and science. So one, we have to prepare our kids here for the jobs of the future. That's why I started National Lab Day. And we just started it, hey, it's a giant matching site. Let's connect scientists and engineers with our schools. And it's really taken off. But we also, as you said, have to use technology in our classrooms. And we're just at the very beginning of this. Adaptive online learning, using technology to provide much more individualized instruction. Those are some of the waves of the future. And I've done a lot in this area and love to talk more about it.
Thank you. 30 seconds. Ms. Medini.
This is question number 21 of 29 cards that came up. The state legislature keeps passing laws that force local governments to build more high-density housing without regards to impacts on local schools. How would you approach such legislation as an assembly member?
Ms. Kishimoto. 30 seconds.
Well, one easy step is to remove the cap that currently exists. There's a state law which caps the school impact fee for new construction. I think it's $2.35 or something, and it barely pays for new portables. So it's time to raise that cap and to fully pay the impact.
Mr. Becker.
I'm not very familiar with the specifics of that issue. I'll just say that ultimately, if we have more density, I think it could be a positive thing for our schools, help build more community around our schools, and maybe those can be other opportunities for us to get parents more involved in the schools, which all the research shows is critical to do.
Mr. Gordon.
I would agree with Ms. Kishimoto on this question. I think that one of the things we need to do is to adjust the school impact fee so that local districts, if housing is being built, have a way to recoup some of the costs. They're not able to do that at the moment. And I also think that if we are going to build higher density developments, one of the things we can be looking at is some very innovative things that would include within those mixed-use developments opportunities for child care centers and other things that could be supportive of our educational program in the long run.
We're getting close. We're going to do one more question.
We started a little late, so we can go.
We could go a little longer. Yeah. This will be the last 30-second question. And Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah. This assembly district has, I believe, 28 community school districts. A diverse range, of everything in California, from the families with the highest income to those with the lowest income, and everything in between. What would you do in the legislature to help those districts that are not basic aid districts that struggle often with the highest need population, many of them immigrants, many of them English language learners, from poor families? What do you think in this environment the legislature, you and legislature, could do that would be helpful to those communities?
30 seconds. Mr. Becker.
In 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot we can do, and a lot of experience. Again, with Full Circle Fund, we spent 3-4 years working in the Oakland School District and participating in attempted massive transformation of that district. And some things have worked, some things haven't, but we've learned a lot from that experience. And I'm already working with folks like Larry Moody in what we can do to improve the Ravenswood School District. So it just requires some focus and some attention. And ultimately, we need to all get together and lift all boats in this district. And that's what people want. We've seen the passion on this issue from parents, and everyone wants to lift all boats in this issue.
Mr. Gordon.
Yeah, the first call on any state dollar, now or new, has to be for education. And the priority must be to raise up those school districts that are low wealth. Gordon, you served on the high school board. You know the challenges of having districts with huge disparity of funding and what that means when they get to the high school level in terms of capacity. We've got to raise up those schools. Currently, much of our system is based on punishing schools who perform poorly we ought to be giving them more support and more help.
Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. Well, as you say, California has changed dramatically. I mean, it's if you look at the K-12 education population, it's 49% Hispanic, 9% Asian. I think it's 7% African American. It's the next generation is going to be dramatically different from this age cohort, and 25% English learners. So one is really to kind of think about the pace of change as well. I mean, it's that, you know, I was the only English learner in my classroom when I grew up, and we want to talk about the pace of change and how much we can do that. And second thing, okay, all right.
Thanks so much. All right, we are drawing to the close of our hour and a half discussion about education, and you were asked to prepare or give a 1-minute closing statement, and I'd like you to do so, starting with Mr. Gordon, and then we'll have a few closing comments from us. Mr. Gordon.
R.D. Laing, a British psychiatrist, once wrote that with each new child, there's a spark of light precipitated into the outer darkness. I believe that it is our responsibility to help turn that light into a bright and shining star. And that's why, as a society and as a state, we must make education our #1 priority. Any society that it neglects its children, does not educate or nurture them, will not survive. We have underfunded our schools in California. We have not given teachers their due credit. We need to change the model in California. I'm proud to be supported by Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, California teachers and school employees, local school board members, county superintendents in both San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, and I would ask for your support and your vote on June 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Ms. Kishimoto.
Thank you. I've been out knocking on doors 3 or 4 hours a day, had a chance to talk to many of you, and education and budget are consistently at the top of the agenda. So I will bring a common sense approach and passion to really California of the future. And the vision I see for California is that we have the challenge and opportunity of uniting the most diverse population in the United States with the innovation-based economy and a challenge to build a green economy to lead the world. Those of you who know my service on the City Council know that I'm a bulldog. I may look quiet, but I stay on top of issues until they're solved. I build coalitions, and I would be very proud to serve you as a leader on the Education Committee to restore California as a true education state.
Thank you. And Mr. Becker.
When thinking about education, trying to find the right analogy, one of my supporters who's a school board member in San Carlos, Mark Olbert, was talking to him the other day, and he really compared it to the frog in the pot, right? If you put the frog in the boiling water, he jumps out. But if you just keep turning the temperature, he stays in there till he dies. And education in California, right now, we've just been turning up the heat a little bit every year. Cut 5% here, 10% here, 13% this year. And what we'd have to step back and look at, we're really seriously undermining our schools and seriously undermining our future. And it borders on unconscionable. And that's the #1 issue we have to address. And I know that people care about it. I know because you work on the parcel tax. I know because when I'm walking or I'm at the farmer's market, everyone comes up to me, talks about education. San Jose State professor, we're cutting 1/3 of our biology majors. People here, 4 of our 10 teachers were cut. This is the #1 issue. I know that we all care about it. And what we have to do is all work together. And if we all work together, we can solve this problem. We can improve education and get the state on track for our children and their children. I love your support. Thank you.
Well, you can applaud now, folks. They did a great, great job.